Welcome to the Impact Driven Leader podcast with me, your host, Tyler Dicker. Today, Monday Newswire, joined by producer Alex. I'm on the road. I'm actually in Austin, Texas for an event. First time in Austin. This is what I have to say so far walking through the airport. I felt like I was back in California, but weirdly, I understood I wasn't. And we'll see. I'm going to be here for another day and a half, but just it's kind of like, all right, taking it all in. I'm just interested. So that's my take so far on Austin.
Did you get barbecue yet?
No. We haven't. We got here, we landed, we just kind of hung out. We were in Boise for the Boise State Nevada match. Got to see Ashton Genty just roll through the strong Nevada defense.
That was a close game, right?
Yeah, 28-21.
Yeah.
A lot of turnovers. Anyways, but we're here to talk about the post-election things that are going on. One thing that has hit me, especially living in a state, I would say a blue state, that's the way to describe it, Washington, is the Washington former governor, because there's a newly elected governor, and the former governor, the newly elected governor have mounted this charge against the Trump administration, but they're not alone. You have Gavin Newsom that's coming out that's saying, I am going to go find money reserves to fight the Trump administration. You have the Illinois governor, the Massachusetts governor, New York governor. A lot of these blue state governors, New Jersey, are saying, coming out post-election, saying, we are going to fight them. Now, here's an interesting context. I read this morning. It's a New York Times article. And this is the title. It says, Democrats Who Won. We're covering this year's successful Democratic campaigns. And the most interesting part of this, they said these are what these candidates, what they focused on: immigration, the economy, and culture wars. And I think what's interesting here in that context is you're starting to see a lot of this through the pundits, a lot of through popular news, that they're starting to really differentiate, saying, hey, the people that have won, that really understand their constituency, are focusing on those things. Those are the most important pieces. Whereas the ones that are trying to double down that they are right, much like what I would say the blue state, the Gavin Newsom's, the Washington governor, are like, it's all about climate. It's all about, all of the different gender rights issues. Right. And what it's things are pointing to is like, that isn't what people want to really focus on. They want to focus on the other pieces. So what's your take on this, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, you saw this coming after, Trump wins, Senate and the House go red. Anyone that's left, in these blue states, or the majority of the state is, Democratic, you knew they were gearing up for a battle and a fight. And as far as saying, basically we'll kill, there'll be blood spilt over this. Some of these governors are wacky. And you look at their states, I first look at it this way. It's like, what is the health of that state in terms of, affordability, housing, prices, jobs? And many of those states are some of the most expensive in the country. They have extremely high home prices, gas prices, food prices, taxes, from property tax to state income tax. And you've seen, I lived in California. You lived in California. Yeah. We both left California.
Yeah.
And
I live in Washington now, which is trying to one up California for being right. California. Here's one thing. This was from Fox 13 in Seattle. They posted this, I believe yesterday over the weekend. It said Washington Governor Jay Inslee, again from Washington, this is near and dear, cheered local election results and promised the state will remain defiant as the Trump administration moves back into office. Under Inslee and the Democrats, Washington has the third highest gas price in the nation. Mm-hmm. They have the fifth highest unemployment rate. They have the second highest rate of property crime. They have the ninth highest cost of groceries and the sixth highest homeless rate. Mind you, since 2018, I didn't understand this, but it explains why it's been a 6-7 year kind of downhill, is that all three seats of the Washington, I would say judicial, all the branches have been controlled by the blue. And it's that to me is doubling down on insanity.
Well, they say that they're focusing on. I was reading a political article. I've read a couple different articles, and the main things that each of these people in these states, these governors in these states, is like immigration, environment, LGBTQ plus rights, and reproductive care. And all of those things are great and wholesome, and I get it. We want to keep things fair for people and people feel safe, but I was having this conversation with my wife, who is a Democrat, and I said clearly the people voted, and they were unhappy with the last 4 years. The majority of the country is unhappy with what's occurred and what's taken place, and everything's expensive. And I think there's no perfect, whether it's Democrat or Republican. There's no perfect like everything's going to align and we're all, but
nope,
I said,
no one doesn't have all the answers.
Yeah, but I said, well, they clearly, some people rank these things, right, of their importance, right, where these things lie. Some of those things on that list, on Gavin Newsom's list and these other Democrats, are at the bottom of the totem pole for a lot of these, middle of the ground.
Well, I would say for the majority of the country, and at least 40 to 45% of these states they represent. That's the shocking part to me, is it's like what you're just talking about. Hey, all those things, yeah, those are factors for, I would say, a majority of the country. That is, but for a greater majority, those, like you said, are down the list. And even in the states where these governors, these politicians represent, their state is saying wholesale, those are not what we're focused on.
Right. The focus isn't there. And I think that's where their problem lies right now, is they're so entrenched and dug their heels into these, couple of categories of contention.
I would say extreme.
Yeah. And it's like, it didn't work. It clearly didn't work. It's not what the people want. Like, this is, again, Tyler, I think where you can really talk about ego and narcissism and these people just not letting go and just saying, you know what? I think it's time to change. I think, Well,
here, I'd love to, and again, we'll take the opportunity the next handful of minutes to spin this to a leadership perspective. One of the greatest charges in leadership is it's not about you.
Right.
And in this case, we have leaders that are saying, no, it's about me. It's about either my agenda, it's about my party's agenda, or it's what I feel like I've been charged to, I would say, be the leader in. Again, quotes, be the leader, meaning I'm going to take the front. But that isn't what you're elected to do. The newly elected governor in Washington, his role and responsibilities look out for the rights of all citizens. And what he's essentially saying, and again, I'm speaking at this as a Washingtonian, I'm speaking from it, is like, no. Everything you're saying is you're discounting over 45% of your state. You're saying, I don't look out for you. I'm going to make it more difficult for you. I'm going to force you into doing one of two things: submit or leave. That's essentially what he's saying is, in his words, is I am going to lead the charge. Washington as a state led over the 4 years of Trump's candidacy. I just learned this. Led the charge in the legal battle against Trump. Yeah. They alone, as the AG of the state, the newly elected governor, had 36 cases against Trump. So that means that you're only representing a fringe part of your, entire state, because there's, I would say, of a lot of the people, this middle of the road Democrats, like we mentioned earlier, they aren't worried about that as much as you are. Yeah. And you're choosing to go after someone in your perspective rather than the whole perspective of who you're to represent. That's not what leadership is about.
Well,
it's not about you.
Yeah. And I think, we've seen that now with these governors. We talked about different businesses, right? Yeah. A few months back, basically, whether it's work back in the office or, hey, we're moving the office here, you need to come in. Yeah. It's like the same tactic. And it's clearly not working. It's clearly.
Here's one of the things that I think is going to filter out. I mentioned you either submit or you leave. Well, we see that so often in workplaces, right? And that can be okay. I think back, and I was sharing with a friend the other day, we talked about Alan Mulally. Alan Mulally was the CEO at Boeing decades ago. He was the CEO of Ford during the financial downturn of 07, 08. He came in and helped really revitalize, turn the ship there. And one of the things that he did in his early days was saying, I care about you, but what you're doing here, we can't have here. So you either change or you leave. And if you leave, that's okay. I will help you go wherever you want to go. And that to me is a very healthy stance from a leadership perspective of what am I aimed to do? I am aimed to run the business. I am aimed to, make sure our customers are well suited, taken care of. And I think often in political spheres that, and this happens in a lot of businesses, is people forget about who's the real customer. The customer in the political sphere is the voter. That's the customer, and that's the customer that you need to look out for. And in many times in many businesses, that's who the customer, the person who pays, who buys your product, who's takes on your service. That's who really has a voice in what you're doing. And so often we see this, again, has been documented, that we have leaders that are choosing not to look out for their customer. And so when they're no longer viable, or when they continue to struggle, should we see any surprise? I think what's really interesting, and I've gathered this, I think Trump is taking this very personally. And I think Trump has stated, I will look out for all these citizens that voted for me. And if that means I have to go straight toe-to-toe with those states that want to discount their rights, I think we're going to see more of that. And that's kind of what has been voiced in the last couple of days. What's your take on that?
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And this is the thing. If you read all these articles and what these governors are saying, the language that it's like they believe they're protecting those citizens, right? They're like, I will do everything in my power to protect the people of this state, and making sure, and a lot of it is around immigration and this mass deportation that could take place. And, I think that should be looked at in terms of, who came in legally, who's got a record, who's working. Like there should be a process to how that unfolds. And their lingo and what they're saying is like, these governors, these Democratic governors, is I'm protecting the people. I'm protecting you from Trump. And it got me thinking about, from both sides, both parties, of like, they're so, I don't want to use the word brainwashed, but they're so entrenched in that their ideology and the way they think is the absolute right way. And they can't take the blinders off and open them up and have these conversations with the incoming president or the opposite side of the party and figure out a path forward that meets somewhere in the middle that's mutual and beneficial for everyone else. It's just, they work with these blinders on it. And just like in business and in life, like that isn't how you should be operating.
Well, and I think that goes back to, as the New York Times article referenced, the Democrats that got elected. They're ones that said, hey, we're going to separate ourselves from the far extreme. I would say that there's probably Republicans that did the same. We're going to separate ourselves from the far extreme. The Project 2025, we want nothing to do with that. That's not what our party represents. We're talking about these three key issues: immigration, the economy, and our general society culture. What are we made up of? What's important? And I think that's where the compromise is coming. And maybe we see this through this election. Maybe we see it through the next midterm election, where we have this gravitation more towards what is really at the center of the issues. It's not these far extremes that it wants to be made out to be. It's, can we come together in the middle and not worry about red or blue, but what are these central figures that we're missing? I think in order for Trump to have a successful presidency, which lines with many, many leaders, the more that he can define that is where's the middle, and separate from the extremes, attacking the far left or really embracing so hardcore the far right, but find that middle could really set up for midterm and or the next president. Because I believe that's where we're all gravitating towards, is how can we embrace our values, embrace the cost of living, what makes America great,
Right.
but yet not get so hung up on the extremes that it really, I saw this yesterday, and it's true. And it was a video of a guy riding down the freeway. He was standing on top of a truck. He had a flag. He had like shorts on, and it was America. And it was like, are we at the point now where people can come out of the shadows and embrace the political, a different political point of view, meaning the Trump point of view? And it's, my opinion is, with what we're seeing from a lot of these, very, very liberal Democratic governors, I don't think quite yet, because if you live in one of those states, man, you feel very ostracized.
Yeah. I mean, I just moved there away from California just about a year ago. And I never, lived even in New York, living in New York City. I was born in New York City, raised in New Jersey. I never saw what I saw in Los Angeles. The extreme swings of poverty, homelessness, drug addiction, a woman defecating on the street, and then billionaires and 100 millionaires with these in Bel Air and all these areas. It's like that place feels so run into the ground, and it's so expensive. The homes there are crazy. And even in New York, like New York City doesn't have that. Any other place doesn't have that. And you got to go, there's something wrong here. And at the end of the day, whether I think we've come a long way with LGBTQ rights and, equality I think we've come a long way since then. And I think people feel that and feel safe. But the real thing is like prosperity. People want to, stress usually comes from, because of the world we live in, from a lot of financial stress, right? It leads to, we can't do this or that, and arguments and fights among couples and families are usually around that. And I feel like if you can have, like what Trump had mentioned, a golden age of just bringing prosperity, a good living to most people, at least we can reduce people's stress levels. They're working, they feel like they have a purpose. And then they can feel like, okay, why the hell are we all fighting for, arguing and it's coming from the extreme sides of both parties. Tyler, I live here in Palm Coast, Florida. I've never seen within 1 square mile an LGBTQ flag and a Rebel South flag, like within a couple blocks from each other. It's like,
but here's the take on that. Those are two of the extremes, and one may not, like, one's racist, I would say. The other one is, represents a unity of just as much I don't want to say vile, but a cause against people that don't, want to outwardly, partake in the in that I would say type of life. I think that's where it's gotten to. And in my take, it's very much, if you're not supporting the LGBTQ plus, if you're not outwardly supporting that lifestyle, it is viewed as you're against it. And I don't think that's the case. Just as much as, I don't think we've gone to the point where, again, we could justify it as, racist with the Confederate flag, whatever. And that's been largely held. I think we as a country have said, hey, if that's what people are doing, that's their free speech. Don't agree with it. But it doesn't mean if I'm not parading around with one of those that I'm against it. And I think that's where, again, the polls, right? The two separates. How I'd view it in this conversation. Don't mix it. But what so often is, you can have that in harmony. And, there's a story about a gentleman. He took the opportunity. He was a Black individual, and he ended up befriending one of the grand wizards of the KKK.
I know this
right?
story.
We've talked about this before, and they ended up becoming very close friends.
And the grand wizards actually renounced being part of it. It took time. It took many years. I know
that took just simply appreciating each other. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where the great opportunity is here, is not to point fingers in vitriol, which we're seeing, I would say, more one side than the other. And it's just like, hey, just appreciate, the Democratic, representatives, the Democratic, the blue. Hey, just appreciate that you have people in your state that don't think the issues that you think are absolutely must fix as must fixed. They have different, and if you're not at least willing to listen to them
Right.
and give them credence, and ask the party that you represent, say, hey, is this a big deal to you? Because they're not asking that. They're saying that's not the agenda because they want this separation in order to stay in power. Then you're not doing your job. I want to read this portion of my newsletter that went out Friday. It's as well released on LinkedIn today. And let me share this: is vision is the keystone of leading. Only with a clear and expressed vision can a leader encourage others to go with them to achieve a mission. We tell our kids to avoid getting into a car you don't know where it's headed. This only leads to disaster and bitter consequences. Everyone who leads someone, including yourself, is now in a place to curate and articulate a vision of what life is to come. Will you read this page and turn to the next? Or you keep underlining and highlighting the page we have been on in hopes that this story stays the same way? I think as I share that, as I sum up what's going on, we have many leaders in this country who are trying to go back and highlight and underline a page because that's the hill they want to die on, instead of turning their page and saying, hey, what are we going to write today? Yeah. Because if whatever we choose to write today, it's in a new day with a new sunrise that's going to have another sunset. Let's choose to write that story rather than continue to perpetuate a story that really doesn't apply to, I would say, the entire nation. It doesn't apply anymore.
Yeah. And Darrell Davis, that's the gentleman's that black man.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah.
So Darrell, if and you say this, what is that saying you always have of putting your arms around those?
Empathy. It's empathy. Putting your arms around people and walking with them. And that's what we need today.
Yeah. And that's exactly, if those blue state governors took your advice, Darrell Davis's advice, and just said, hey, we're going to talk to Trump and his party, and we're going to figure this out. Like that's, and what, anytime when that's happened and occurred, it may take a year or 2 or 3 or 4, but it always ends up positive.
Yeah. Because now what you're doing is you're digging your heels in as much as what's been said, and you're creating more division, because those people that want to kind of work together, as we've heard from some of these, representatives, Democratic representatives that have gained their office, they're like, hey, we want to work together. We understand those are really the issues. Man, I would say in the states, in the areas where they represent, there's probably going to be a lot more harmony, as opposed to the states where you have the leaders that are coming out with their pitchfork and they're going to go after Trump before Trump even stepped into office. Yeah. Like, come on.
Yeah.
All right.
You got an event coming up, right? This coming year?
May 7th and 8th of next year, 2025 in Spokane, Washington. It's going to be the second annual Impact Driven Leader Summit. It will be an amazing event. I sure hope that you'll take time to join us to be there in Spokane. It should be gorgeous in the month of May. The Lilac City should be start blooming and all those things. There's some amazing parks there if you want to come and enjoy that. I know we're going to have a great time. I will be encouraged to see you there, Alex.
Yes, I will be
running the ship. And so again, thanks for joining in. Thanks for being with us today. As a reminder, remember to subscribe on YouTube. Hit that bell button if you're watching it there. As well, if you're watching on LinkedIn, make sure that you are aware that on each Monday, I share the newsletter. We release that on LinkedIn. You can also click on that link to make sure they get emailed when that goes out on Friday. As well, remember this: choose to lead with impact. Thanks. We'll catch you next time.